All right. All right. Welcome back. Happy Thursday. Y'all got to stop playing with me. It's almost Friday. And welcome to Brown Girl Sound Off, BGSO. I am Tony Woodland. I am joined by my amazing co hosts, Edwina, Chantel, and Nafisa. Okay, go Fifi. Okay. Listen, it's always a party when you get the four of us together. So, we just have a great time. But let's get into it. Last week, we kicked off our new series for the month of April. We already told you all we were going to be talking about relationships. And so we started out talking about, well, what is it that we do to prepare for relationships? If you didn't see that episode, I highly encourage you to go back and watch it because it's going to be a nice segue into what we're going to be talking about tonight. And so we know that sometimes, many times in life, right, we've done a lot of prep work, a lot of preparation. We've done all that self work, dismantled some stuff. We're very clear about what we want. And still, things show up in our relationships, right? And so, what we're going to be talking about today is like, what do we do to remain intact? Even when things all around us are falling apart. I can think, just from personal experience of what it felt like to be in a situation where it just felt like everything around me was falling apart. And so, what a lot of people want to know, what people ask me, honestly, Tony, how is it that you kept it together? Like, how are you still doing X, Y, Z? They thought I was a whole unicorn or something, but that's not what it was. At the end of the day, honestly, I'm going to share a little secret. So what I did was I perpetuated that prep work, right? A lot of times I forget the infomercial where they said you just set it and forget it, and so life is not like that. And so a lot of times we think, oh, I've prepared for this. I prepare, so I'm good. I prepared for this. And then life throws a whole curveball and we looking stuck. How is it that we prevent that from happening? That feeling of shock, the surprise. How did this happen to me after all this work I've done? Right? After all this identity work I've done, and I know who I am, I know what I want. I didn't forget my values, as Edwina told us last week, right? I was very, very clear. How could this happen to me? And so when I share bits of my story with folks, I always share that I didn't stop at the preparation. I knew that preparation work is perpetual work and it's ongoing work. And so for me, remaining intact looks like recommitting to those same things that I did during the preparation stage over and over and over again, sometimes even in the same day, y'all. You know what I mean? So when you say that you value space, you don't just enter a relationship and say, hey, I value time in personal space, and you think a person's going to give it to you. No, even in a moment when you feel closed in on, you've got to restate and recommit to that, despite things falling apart, despite someone else not wanting to give you that personal space, right? So you got to do what you got to do. But I want to hear from my lovely co-hosts. So Chantel, tell me, what is it that you do? What have you done? What advice can you give around remaining intact, even when things are falling apart? After all that prep work you did, what can you do?
Tony, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think going back to your foundation, right? Tapping back into that place where you knew you were healed. You knew you were it. You knew your life was aligned. Everything was in focus. Your emotions were intact. How do you get back to that place when it seems like life is falling apart or your relationship is falling apart? And I'm going to reiterate having that strong foundation. I was talking to a friend and she said to me, well, I don't necessarily want to build my relationship on love. I want to build my relationship on friendship, because there are going to be days when the love is just not there, but the friendship will always remain. And for me, that was so profound for me. What is your foundation? What are you building your foundational principles on? And how do you get back to that place? I think is how you can remain intact when it seems like life is falling apart.
Yeah, and so what you made me think about in my whole visual mind self is like this home base, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about that foundation that you're talking about, Chantal, I think about it as being home base. Like, all right, let me touch down again. Let me go back to that, And so what you're saying is very much in alignment with what I share with folks in terms of how it is that I keep myself intact. And let me just tell you something, viewers and sisters on this call, because I'm sure you all know this too. Just because you do all of these things that we're even talking about doesn't mean that you also don't fall apart temporarily, right? But that's the
Right.
difference. That's the difference. I think a lot of times when we start talking or thinking in a binary way that is either or, I'm either intact or I'm whole, right? And I can't be anything in between. I can't be both. It can't be a yes and. I think that's when we start to do ourselves a disservice and we start to question, well, who am I? Am I the one who's falling all apart? Or am I the person who has it all together? Right. And as my sister Nafisa always says, you don't have to have it all figured out. And she says that's from one strong Black woman to another strong Black woman. Right. So whenever she tells me that and gives me that advice, is so affirming because it lets me know that even though I may be touching home base and going back to my values, going back to that foundation, I still might fall apart every now and then.
And
Right.
that's okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Absolutely. All right. I wanna hear from you next, Edwina. What do you do to remain intact?
And I am thinking about what I didn't do, in a previous relationship. And so my advice would be, don't stop doing what you used to do before you got into the relationship. Like some people like to, all of a sudden, it's like your friends no longer matter. It's like, what used to make you happy, it starts to kind of like dwindle away a little bit the more involved you get into this relationship. So my advice would be definitely to don't lose yourself in it, to keep those things, that self-preservation, that thing that makes you happy. If you had a routine of getting your nails done every Thursday, don't stop that routine. Keep that every Thursday routine. If you went out with your girlfriends every, Saturday, whatever, keep those things, because we know that relationships, they come and go. Like we want them to stay and remain forever, but when they don't, you find yourself in a situation where it's like, well, dang, where are my friends at? When it's over, it's like you have to start all over again. So I think just remembering not to lose yourself, to keep those things that used to make you happy, to continue to make yourself happy. Like, what are my individual, like you still have to have your individual goals in your relationship. Like, yeah, we have this thing that we're trying to build together, but I'm still myself. Like, there is still an individual in this relationship, and she is me. So don't lose who you are before you even go in there, while you're in there. So
Sis
my two
said,
cents.
and she is me. I love that. I'm all about like declaration. Like you know who I am.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that you touched on whew, that's a whole word. I love that you touched on doing what makes you happy. And I'm gonna add do what makes you happy and whole, right?
Yeah.
Because you're so, so, so right, sis, in terms of when I love speaking from the I perspective because I never want anybody to think that I come
Exactly.
on BGSO and I'm speaking from a place of like, oh, I don't have this experience or that ain't me or I'm talking down or to someone. No, I'm talking about me right now. Okay. So I just want to put that out there because so many times on these platforms, sisters show up, in perfection and Tony ain't it. That ain't me. So, I think about times when I have lost myself in relationships because I
Mhm.
failed to do what it was that you suggested we do, right? Where I've gotten in a situation where I looked around and I didn't have, friends around me. And not because my friends were dropping off, but I was slowly isolating myself. And
Mhm.
I think about
Mhm.
in many ways where we've seen, lots of stuff going on in social media, right? And we've all seen when folks get in relationships and you can tell like when they look like they've lost their souls, the very essence of who they are. And I want to call that what it is too. That's abuse, a lot of times, it's both self-inflicted and a lot of times, folks are inflicting that on us because it's very intentional. It is to separate the person that they wish to prey on, right, away from their support system. So I wanted to throw that out there because that's something that you can look at from definitely two sides. What am I doing to remain connected to people and things that make me feel whole and happy? And let me be on a lookout for ways that my partner or my spouse or my friend or whomever is trying to distance me from those things. And that doesn't always have to be, maybe I was a bit extreme, but that doesn't always have to be abusive. Sometimes, it starts out and folks, as human beings, we're selfish, right? We want our resources and things all to ourselves, but y'all know what I'm talking about. The folks that are like, you ain't got no friends. I'm your friend. I'm your family. It's like, wait a minute. Because I do have friends and I have things that I like to do. So thank you for bringing that up. Fifi, what you think, Nafisa?
Well, I definitely agree with everything you ladies said. And like Edwina said, and you did as well, you touched on too, it's so important to remain an individual, because I feel like you can so easily just get lost in a relationship and it starts to define you. Did you almost just forget yourself? You forget what you like to do, what you like to eat, just even little small things. So I think remembering to pour into yourself and do those things that make you feel whole, that make you feel happy, and you being responsible, as I said, in the previous episode, for your own happiness. And like she said, if you have that brunch date you usually did monthly, if you like to go get a cocktail once a month with your girls, if you like to go travel, whatever, remembering to have a life outside of your relationship is very important. And doing those things that define you and that you enjoy and that you like to do outside of your partner is so important, because I feel like a lot of times when you just pour yourself so much into the relationship and you lose yourself, and it is an unfair thing, as Tony touched on our last episode, to put that much pressure on your mate too, because it's like almost smothering. It's like, okay, everything I do, like, it's with you. I got to be with you. You're defined your whole, like, just being around this person. And a lot of times I feel like it's not even intentional. It's just like what you lean into. Like, okay, well, I'd rather just spend time with them. I'm not going to go out with my friends, canceling dates, not doing the phone calls, not keeping in touch with family, and just really remembering to not allow the relationship to define you, and continue to be an individual and continue to do those things that you enjoy doing outside of your relationship. And another thing is just remember to just practice grace with yourself, because even though you've done the work and you've done that healing work, you will still have some days where you just aren't feeling that great. And that is okay to not have it all together all the time. And just remembering to try to, like, ground yourself in those moments. Like, okay, maybe I cooked a full course meal the other day, but today we're ordering out. That's the best I can give you today. I'm not going to cook, go make a sandwich, or we can order something out, and not beating myself up like, oh, I didn't make a home cooked meal. They had to eat out, or I had to eat a sandwich. Like, I think that we just put so much pressure on ourselves. And I think we just have to remember that we're all just trying to do the best we can and be the best versions of ourselves every day. And every day it's going to look different and can look different. And just remember to practice grace with ourselves in those moments.
I'm a huge fan of practicing grace and showing self-compassion. Because I've seen what the opposite can do to the way that we see ourselves, especially, a lot of us have entered relationships, or, and I mean this very broadly. I mean relationships, like your relationship with your job, right? A lot of us have entered relationships and lost or temporarily forgotten bits and pieces of ourselves. And when we fall into that trap of then looking around like, dang, I'm not doing what I used to do, and then we perseverate on that, then as I mentioned last time, then we can start to shape a whole different identity for ourselves. I'm a failure. I'm this, I'm that. When, as you just said, Nafisa, we've got to remember that this is a journey, right? So just get back up. Just get back up. Just take the best next step toward getting yourself back on track. As Chantel said, let's take the best next step to touch home base again so that we can reconnect with what it is that we truly care about, right? And what it is we truly want out of these relationships. And so, what I want to do is, I want to, like, I know that we keep it real all the time, but I want to get really real. Like, I want to keep it like, you know how they say on social media and all that, real, real, right? I want to keep it real, real. And I want to talk about what gets in the way sometimes. Like, I really want us to share what has gotten in the way, because we never know. We don't know. There may be a sister, anybody who's watching this, who is, in a situation where they're wondering, how in the world did I get here? Right? How is it that I lost myself? And so we're talking about how is it that we remain intact, but what got in the way of us being intact in the first place? And so I want us to share, because maybe it may help someone think differently. A lot of times we're in situations and we think we don't know why we're in them. Come on, listen, y'all know this is a whole word. I know I've been in situations and I'm like, I don't know how I got here. Yeah, it just did it. I'm like, Tony, you know exactly the things you overlooked. You know exactly the things that you excuse. So I'm kind of segueing into what I would say. What gets in the way sometimes, our excuses that we make for people. I know my sis over there, Alina, talks about like seeing potential, right? We see potential in people and things, honey, right? And so, when we see that, we're like, oh, but I know what it could be. And so you're operating in a space that's like a figment of your imagination, right? A figment of your foreshadowing of a place you haven't even been to yet, but yet you are walking through that space as if you're already there. But then you're wondering why you're having the outcomes that you're having and the experiences that you're having. And so I say it is the excuses. And honestly, since we're keeping it real, it is the not being real with ourselves about what's really going on. I don't know. I see Edwina shaking her head. I know that we've had this conversation before. Sis, come on, what gets in our way?
Yeah, I think and listen, I'm going to be a 100% people pleasing. I think that we do. I don't know what it is. And I know I'm speaking from the I perspective. I want everything to work out. I think we want everything to work out. We want this to be the relationship. So I'm going to do whatever it is that I have to do to make it work. And so I am going to dismiss all the red flags, because there has to be another way. This has to work. And so I really do. I think it's just it's the wanting it to work so bad that we disregard everything else. Like we become like people pleasers, and that's any type of relationship. A friendship, you can be a people, like I want to have friends, so I'm going to accept whatever the friends do to me, because like we're going to make this work. She's been my friend since we was in elementary school. So what? She treats me like I'm a piece of dirt on the sidewalk, like, but she's my friend since elementary school, so we're gonna be friends forever. And so I really do think that it's that people pleasing, and then the whole mentality of just wanting it to work so bad that we just disregard everything else.
Yeah. Oh, girl, I'm sure you hit a nerve for some people. First of all, you hit a nerve for me, because I always dig deep and think about, I can't help but to bring like my identity lens into this conversation. I think about, how do we even get there? You know what I mean? So like, I'm even backing up. Why is it that we want stuff to work so bad? And I think about, I see Chantel. So Chantel, I want you to chime in next, because I already know you got a lot of stuff to say on this, because you already know the pressures that are placed, okay, absolutely, on women as a whole. But when we talk about being a Black woman, when we talk about being a brown woman, a woman of color, and the way society, looks at us as unlovable. And so in some ways, we're always looking to prove them, whoever them are, right? We're always looking to prove them wrong. Look, I can have this relationship. I can be that submissive wife, since you think that all I do is show up and be angry and push back. I can be loving, right? So when I think back to how it is that we even end up in those spaces, I think about the pressures around just being a woman of color, and sometimes we internalize failed relationships as us being failures ourselves, right? And let me actually, correct myself, because just because a relationship ended doesn't mean it was a failure, right? You learned something from it. You might have learned, I'm not going to take that crap anymore. I don't want to go after those types of people anymore, right? So it's not a failure. It ended. It ended. Period. It ended. Okay, sis. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just get heated about that because I know what you're saying, Edwina, in terms of us wanting to please people. And if we're being really real, why is it that we think that way?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Woo, Chantel, please take the mic from me.
Take it from her.
I think just what Edwina said, but even to go even further, us as Black women knowing our worth, knowing our value, and not only that, but think about how we were raised in our individual homes. What were we raised to be taught and to believe since we were young girls, right? You grow up, you get married, right? You have children, you work. And so even from young ages on up, we're taught all of these roles and these labels are slapped on us, right? And we were not taught, no, dream, no, do, no, pursue, find out what makes you happy. Go do those things. And so we are already behind the 8 ball as far as our identity and how it's being shaped, because it's being shaped into roles and not the character of who we are as young Black and brown women, right? With that being said, the issue is we have to go back to the beginning, right? And redefine who we are as Black and brown women and say, no, I'm not just a mom. I'm not just, whatever kind of label you guys want to slap on me. I'm going to define who I am in and out of relationship, right? And so for me, you touched on the identity part, and Edwina talked about the people, and I'm sitting over here like, yes, yes. Knowing our worth, knowing our value, that we are not just identified by how many children we're able to have, or if we are married or not, and things like that. And I think us having this conversation is just so important. So.
Ooh, oh my gosh, Chantal, I knew you were on the edge of your seat, because we've talked about this before. And if you're out there and you are watching this, please leave us a comment. As you can see, we are fired all the way up. Please let us know that we're not just, going through this by ourselves, because so many times we don't talk about these things. And I've seen women, especially Black and brown women, stay in relationships far too long to prove points to folks. Right? Folks, including ourselves, like, see, I can do, to prove points. And we should never be trying to prove something to anybody, right? Unless we're proving to ourselves that, hey, I am great, I'm amazing, I can do all things that I put my mind to. Anything beyond that, we shouldn't even be trying to prove, especially not when it comes to staying in situations and relationships that we don't belong in and that are no longer serving us, or in some places have never served us, right? We gotta think about that. Nafisa, what do you want to say?
I was thinking of a couple things, and one of the things I did want to touch on is like just seeing, I think sometimes like just wanting to see, and I know just for me, wanting to see the good in people. And it's like when people show you who they are, it's just like, believe them, this is who they are. And I think sometimes they're like, well, like Edwina said, you might look over those red flags and like, well, maybe those weren't their intentions. That's not what they meant, and trying to always see the good in people, which is a good thing, but also can be crippling as well. And blinding to who a person really is and what they're and how and their toxic behavior. So I think that we just have to kind of be mindful of that too. And yeah, you do want to see the good in people, but also like some things you have to see it for what it is, and to trust your intuition and your gut. And if it's not feeling right and it doesn't feel good to you, and what people are doing isn't right, then it isn't right. And people don't always have the best intentions. And I think we have to be like aware of that and realize when it's not something that's going to be a good relationship for us or serve us. And another thing I thought about is just in the world of social media, I feel like people just see people's highlight reel and you have that comparison and you feel like, well, You know, like I think Chantel touched on it too, like, well, I should be in a relationship too, or I should be doing this in my relationship, or, you know, you have that comparison and you're comparing yourself and looking at other people's highlight reels. And you're just so concerned about what other people think that you could stay in a situation or relationship that's not really good for you. And that is toxic because you don't want to, as Tony said, and Edwina touched on too, you don't want to look like, you know, you don't want to look like a failure. And you feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be married, or I should have a boyfriend, or I should have children, or whatever it is. And you're very concerned about what people's thoughts are of you. So you don't really look at your relationship for what it is, and get out of it when you need to.
You know what, sis, you actually brought up something that, you know, I didn't really plan for us to talk about, but since you brought it up, I would like for us to go a little deeper, because we got some time. But I wanted to talk about social media, right? Because we talked about, Chantel brought up, you know, the way we were raised, and especially in, you know, the Black community, when a lot of us around our age were like raised in church and, you know, and things like that. And so we got a lot of our ideals about what it meant to be a woman. Being a woman meant you were like, remember like some of your first dates where you bringing your man with you to church, you know what I mean? Or you would see that the young couples that are dating and they're bringing them to church. And so, you know, growing up seeing that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't see the other side. If all you've grown up with is you're supposed to be in this relationship, you're doing this to get married, you're getting married to have kids, and you're having kids to prove that you can, right? All these messed up messages that we got around being women. So that's one aspect when we talk about, especially like I said, women in our age group and even older. But let's get into like this whole social media piece, because I see that, yes, I mean, it's definitely impacting us as well, right? Because most of the world, you know, is on social media, at least on Facebook. And so it's impacting older, you know, people who are even older than us, but especially this younger generation. So Nafisa, when you brought up that a lot of folks are looking at, you know, social media, hashtag relationship goals, like that's all you see, then what does that do to our psyche? And even when you think about like on Facebook, for example, how you can indicate your relationship status, you know, so when you think about that, so what happens when it changes? What do you got to go in and click the little toggle thing and say you're now single? And, you know, I mean, what do you all see in terms of social media's role in all of this?
It's definitely toxic. And it's crazy because it's so bad to the point where I was fasting for the season of Lent, and I was fasting social media because social media it sucks you in, and you get so involved and wrapped around in everybody else's world and what's going on and the lies they tell. Okay. Because and that's another thing. It's like, oh, I know you in real life and you over here, you lying. You know, it's like you're wasting so much time. And so social media does play a part, and it has, you know, it does play a good part when you're on there and you're looking for those connections and the network and things like that. And you're trying to stay,
BGSO.
yeah, hashtag BGSO, and you're, you know, really, you know, staying in contact with friends and family. But there is that piece where it's like you're in everybody's life. Mm-hmm. And you're comparing your life, and why can I go on trips, and why can I be with him or her or whatsoever? And it's just, you know, it definitely puts you in a space that can put you like where you don't want to be. You start your day happy and end up depressed because you spent all day looking at social media and the lies that, you know, people tell about their relationship, or the truth, you know, if that's what it is.
But I see the lies too. I'm not gonna call anybody out, but you know, I'm just saying, you know, they had a whole one. Never mind, we're not going on that road. But anyway, so no, yeah, absolutely right. You know, when we're comparing ourselves to things that we see with this ease of access age that we're living in, right? Like people's business is so accessible, you know, when they're going on hashtag vacations and things like that. You know, and so I do think, and I see, I don't want to say, you know, in those young people, well, we're young too, but you know what I'm saying. I don't want to just, you know, push this off as a phenomenon that, Gen, what are they, like Zers or whatever, that they're only facing, and younger, like many of us are on social media. And I think that it plays a huge part into, whether we're thinking about it or not. I'm sure there are people who are going to say, no, I don't care about what people think. And all right, that may be true for you. A lot of us do, right? Whether we admit it out loud or not, a whole lot of us do. So let's just put that out there. And so even though we might not even be thinking of it on a conscious level, it may not even be on the surface that, hey, I had to stay with him because what are my Facebook friends going to think? I don't think we're sitting around thinking about that. But I do think that, the messages, I do know based on brain research, right? Our brain does build schema. The messages that we're taking in consciously and unconsciously, they shape our brain and they shape the way that we respond to things, right? And so it's no surprise rather that then social media can definitely have an impact on whether we stay in relationships that are unhealthy or move on. What are you thinking, Nafisa? Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just think that people need to remember that when we're looking at social media, everybody is showing their highlight reel. Like nobody is letting you know what's going on behind closed doors or whatever else, and I think that, a prime example is when you see a lot of different relationships kind of like end. And you're like, wait, they seem like they was great and they going here, they going on trips and this and that, but everybody has their issues. Everybody has things that they're dealing with and their struggles. And I think that we just have to remember that when we're looking at social media and we're seeing these things, we're seeing, like Wena said, they're going on vacations, or someone's significant other did this wonderful, bought them a car or took them this place or that place, and then you start looking at your thing like, well, wait a minute, so I think we just have to just to be mindful of that everybody has different struggles that they're dealing with daily, and even within the relationships, and we're just seeing their highlight reel.
I like that. I like that reminder. That's a great segue into our final thoughts. So, as we wrap up this episode, it has been such an amazing conversation with you ladies. I'd love to know, just in one sentence, when we found ourselves in situations in which we've lost parts of ourselves, we don't feel like we're intact, how do we get that snap back? What is one thing you would say, could help us snap back and get back to who we are? And go ahead, Chantel. I'll let you start.
I guess I would say go back to your core. Like I touched on, go back to your foundation. Go back to remembering who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Edwina, did you want to share?
I would say give yourself the space to reflect.
Hmm. What about you, Nafisa?
I would say just to go back and do what you need to do to ground yourself, and just to practice grace with yourself, and know that it's going to be okay. You don't have to have it all figured out at that moment.
Yeah. And I agree with everything that you all have shared. The only thing I would add is that once you've done the reflection and all that and you practice grace, then gracefully take the best next step. So you don't have to turn things around all at once, but you can do at least one small thing, even if that thing is inside of you, to start to get that snap back and get back to being more whole than you are. So thank you again for such an amazing conversation. It is always lovely to be in community with my sisters. If you are watching this, please leave us a comment. If you're watching this on Facebook, or even if you're watching on YouTube, please let us know how this episode landed with you. We do know that this particular topic is one that brings up a lot of stuff for a lot of people, including us. And it takes a lot to even share about, our feelings and thoughts around relationships, because there's so many expectations around them. Please tune in. We're going to have a special guest next week. I'm not saying who yet, but please tune in next Thursday. Same place, same time, 7 p.m. So we are out of here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. All right, everyone. Peace out.